This lesson, as you know from the last lesson, it's textual in nature, meaning that we will go through verse by verse. It wouldn't be one of those topical lessons where we would look at like love and fear and those things. We're just going to go through verse by verse. So it literally needs to pick off from the last session, right? So I just want to do a quick recap of what we would have done 2 Wednesdays are back, right? Just to get some context, right? So the last class we looked at Paul. We also looked at the region of Colossae. So we're doing the book of Colossians, and that was the region in which the church was established. We also did a brief look at the overview of the letter, right? That's what we did the last recap, right? So what I want to do is just briefly talk about Paul's ministry. It started in 32 AD, as you can see on the slide, and it ended in 67 AD. Paul wrote several epistles, one of them being the letter to the Colossians church around 61 to 63 AD while he was in prison. The church was established by Epaphroditus and Timothy while Paul was in the siege in Ephesus around 56, 57, or 58 AD, right? This was in his third missionary journey. Ephesus was near the coastline. What I'll probably do the next probably the next lesson, I'll just show a map so we can get some more context in terms of the location as we're speaking about Colossians and Ephesus. We just have a location as to where how it was situated. So Ephesus was near the coastline, whilst Colossae was 100 miles inland inside, right? Paul sent these two, Timothy and Epaphroditus, to evangelize, and they planted this church in Colossae, right? So what was happening now, just to get some further context, is that several years, the church is running, and what happened, they run into some doctrinal problems. And Epaphroditus tells Paul he came to visit him in prison, and he told him about what was happening there in the church, the heresies that was happening there, or the false teaching that was raging in the church. So Paul decided to respond with this letter, right? What was being taught by the false teachers was they considered a higher form of the basic doctrine that they knew. So they were saying that they have this higher form of teaching that is better than the gospel, and that involved angel worship and adherence to the Jewish law, which and they also undermined the apostles' doctrine. Um, Paul is not what they would have done is was saying like, Paul is not really an apostle. Is he, and put that doubt in people's mind, and they were saying that the apostles' doctrine was old, the teaching was old. So they were literally undermining the teaching of the apostles to spread their so-called newer or higher form of what they would consider a better doctrine, right? Most classic, like how most of the false teachers do it now, right? So in our lesson today, we're going to start to actually study the epistle or the letter. So I just gave you some context so you could get an experience of what was happening, why Paul wrote this letter, why he responded in this way, and why he choose to tackle this in this situation, right? So this gives us a fair understanding as to why he started the way he started. All right, so we're going to jump into it, right? So just remember some of the key points that what's happening is one, they had a different doctrine. Angel worship, apparent adherence to the Jewish laws, and they were trying to undermine the apostles' doctrine, the gospel, and Paul as an apostle also, right? So we're going to jump in. So the simple outline, um, the salutation is in verses 1 to 2. Then we have Christ preeminent in relations, verses 3 to 29. Christ preeminent in doctrine, verses Acts chapter 2, 1, 3 to 4, and Christ's preeminence in ethics, 3, 5, 4, 1, and conclusion, 4, 2 to 18, right? So, if you realize a common theme throughout this, it's Christ. So, Paul decided to respond Christ-centered in nature. The core of the response is Christ. The true teaching of Jesus is the response to all. So he didn't decide to tackle each point. He said, here what? I'm not going to talk about angels. I'm not going to refute or debate the Jewish law. I'm just going to present Christ as the one source of truth so you can see it now and you can now compare it to what you were hearing, right? So